My name is Eleanor, and at 65, I thought my heart was safe from surprises. But tonight, at my grandson's wedding, I'm staring at a ghost from my past, the man who broke my heart 43 years ago. If you've ever wondered what if about your first love, then you need to hear what happened when my what if walked back into my life. The champagne flute nearly slipped from my fingers. The grand ballroom, with its cascading white roses and soft, golden light, swam before my eyes. All the happy noise of my grandson's wedding faded into a dull roar as my world narrowed to a single point across the dance floor. Him. Arthur. 43 years vanished in a heartbeat. The distinguished silver in his hair, the fine lines etched around his eyes, they simply melted away. For one breathtaking, terrifying second, he was just Arthur. My Arthur. The boy who held my heart before life taught us how to break it. My son, David, squeezed my arm. Mom? You okay? You've gone pale. I need to sit down, I managed to whisper, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. He guided me to a chair at the family table, his concern evident. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. Arthur stood near the orchestra, looking as lost in time as I felt. He was alone. I knew, from a mutual friend years ago, that his wife had passed away. The knowledge settled in my chest with a strange, sorrowful weight. Can you remember the first time you fell in love? That feeling like your heart was both full and flying? Hold that thought, because that's exactly where the story begins. The university library smelled of old paper and possibility. I was tucked into my favorite corner, lost in Fitzgerald, when a shadow fell over my page. So, you think Hemingway is overrated? I looked up annoyed. A young man with messy brown hair and ink-stained fingers stood there, a challenging grin on his face. I think he was a brilliant writer with the emotional capacity of a teaspoon, I retorted. Why? Are you going to defend him? Not at all, he said, sliding into the seat opposite me without invitation. I just needed an excuse to talk to the girl who looks at a book like it's a conversation. I'm Arthur. Eleanor, I said, a reluctant smile playing on my lips. And you're interrupting a very important conversation with Fitzgerald. He leaned forward, his eyes, a warm, intelligent brown, twinkling. I promise I'm more interesting. My pockets are full of sketching pencils and grand, impossible dreams. And he was. For 3 years, we were inseparable. He was an architecture student, and I was studying literature. We were an unlikely pair on paper, but in practice, we fit together perfectly. He'd sketch his soaring buildings, and I'd weave stories about the people who might live in them. Before we go further, if stories about second chances and lost love speak to your heart, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It truly helps me keep sharing these memories. Now, back to the summer of '78. We'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. Our favorite spot was a grassy hill overlooking the city. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, I rested my head on his shoulder. Do you ever get scared? I asked, my voice quiet. That all of this just ends? He pulled me closer, his voice a soft, sure rumble against my ear. Nothing ends, Ellie. It just changes shape. My love for you? That's the one blueprint I'll never redraw. It's the foundation of everything. I believed him. With the fierce, unshakable certainty of youth, I believed in us. We made plans. He would start his own firm. I would write my novel. We'd buy an old house with a library that had a ladder on a rail, just like in the stories I loved. We built a world for two, a private universe of shared jokes, whispered secrets, and a future that stretched out before us, golden and endless. But foundations, no matter how strong, can crack. And sometimes, the person you think is your forever is only a chapter. It was the spring of 1981. The phone calls started tense, hushed conversations he'd have in the hallway of his shared apartment. He became distant, preoccupied. The light in his eyes, usually so bright when he talked about his designs, began to dim. Finally, one rainy evening, he told me. His father's construction business was collapsing. Debts, bad investments, it was a house of cards falling down. The only way out was for Arthur to move to New York, to take a soulless corporate job with a distant, demanding uncle. It was a 5-year commitment, at least. 5 years. I remember the word feeling like a death sentence. Arthur, that's a lifetime. It's for my family, Ellie. What choice do I have? He'd pleaded, his hands gripping mine. Come with me. Please. We can start over there. The fight that followed was brutal. It was a storm of tears, pride, fear, and the unbearable weight of a reality we were too young to handle. And do what? I cried, hugging myself as if I could physically hold my breaking heart together. Abandon my degree? My family? Watch you become someone you hate in a city that swallows dreams? I can't be a spectator to that, Arthur. I won't be the chain that keeps you there. Have you ever had to make a choice that tore you in two? A decision where every option felt like a loss? Because the choice I made next would haunt me for 4 decades. You're not a chain, he shouted, his voice ragged with desperation. You're the only thing that would make it bearable. I shook my head, the most painful words of my life forming on my lips. No. If you go free. No promises. No long-distance goodbyes that stretch until they snap. A clean break. He stared at me, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. A clean break, he whispered, the fight draining out of him. There's nothing clean about this, Eleanor. You're tearing my whole world in two. I turned away, unable to bear the devastation in his eyes. Then let it break, I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. Maybe one day, the pieces will find a way to fit back together. He left a week later. We never spoke again. Back in the present, the memory was a physical ache. The orchestra began to play a slow, familiar melody. And then, he was there. Standing right in front of me. Eleanor. My name on his lips, after all these years, was a key turning in a lock I thought was sealed forever. Arthur, I breathed, my voice trembling. I didn't know you'd be here. My grandson is the groom's best man, he said, a sad, knowing smile touching his eyes. Small world. He held out his hand. May I have this dance? I looked at his hand, the same hand that had held mine, that had sketched our future. And I placed mine in it. What would you do in that moment? Dance with the ghost of your past or walk away? The choice I made changed everything. But that's a story for the next part. If you need to know what happened when we stepped onto that dance floor, make sure you're subscribed. The most shocking part is yet to come. The moment my hand touched his, 43 years of silence shattered. If you thought our reunion was emotional, what happened next on that dance floor will show you that true love never really dies. It just waits for the right moment to come back to life. Narration begins. His hand was warm and familiar, even after all these years. As he led me to the dance floor, the opening notes of Unchained Melody filled the air, our song from a lifetime ago. It felt like the universe was playing the cruelest, most beautiful joke on us. He placed one hand on my back, the other holding mine, and we began to move. The world disappeared. There was no wedding, no guests, no past, no future. There was only the music and the feeling of his hand on my back, exactly where it used to be. I looked for you, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper near my ear. For years. In every library I ever walked into, in every city where I built something. I never found a ladder on a rail that felt right. A sob caught in my throat. You remembered. I never forgot, he said, pulling me just a little closer. A clean break, you said. You were always so much stronger than me. Tears finally escaped, tracing warm paths down my cheeks. I wasn't strong, Arthur. I was just young and terrified. It was the biggest mistake of my life. He stopped dancing right there in the middle of the floor, his eyes, still that warm, intelligent brown, searching mine. Mine too, he whispered. The music swelled around us, wrapping us in a bubble of what might have been. All the years of wondering, of imagining this moment, collapsed into this single, perfect, heartbreaking now. If this moment were a movie, what song would be playing in the background? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Ellie, he said, and the old nickname sounded like coming home. Is it too late? For a cup of coffee? For another conversation? I looked at this man, this ghost who had haunted my happiest memories, and saw not just the boy I loved, but the man he'd become. The silver in his hair suited him. The lines around his eyes spoke of a life fully lived, with all its joys and sorrows. "It's not too late," I said, smiling through my tears. "We've kept the pieces waiting long enough." After Arthur left for New York, the world lost its color. I finished my degree, got a job at a publishing house, and tried to move on. I dated other men, good men, kind men. But every conversation felt like a translation. Every touch felt like a comparison. 2 years after Arthur left, I met Robert. He was stable, reliable, and loved me in his own quiet way. We married, had our son David, and built a good life together. It was a happy life, filled with birthday parties and anniversaries and quiet Sunday mornings. But it was a different kind of love than what I'd known with Arthur, less like a wildfire, more like a steady hearth. Robert knew, I think, that part of my heart would always belong to someone else. On his deathbed 5 years ago, he'd held my hand and said, "I hope you find your way back to whatever piece of yourself you left behind." I never knew he understood that much. Life has a way of bringing us exactly what we need, even if it takes 40 years to arrive. If you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button. After the wedding reception ended, Arthur and I found ourselves in the hotel's quiet lounge. The sounds of clinking glasses and laughter had faded, replaced by the comfortable silence of two people who had once known each other better than they knew themselves. We sat by the window overlooking the city lights, cups of coffee steaming between us. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, drinking in the details we'd missed for decades. "Tell me about your life," I said finally. "The parts one missed." He smiled a little sadly. "I became an architect, just like I wanted. But it wasn't the kind I dreamed of. I designed office buildings and shopping centers instead of the libraries with ladders we talked about." He stirred his coffee absently. "I married Sarah 15 years after I moved to New York. She was a good woman. We had 2 daughters. "I'm sorry about your loss," I said softly. "I heard about Sarah." He nodded, his eyes distant. "Cancer. 3 years ago. She fought hard." He looked up at me. "And you?" "I know about Robert." "I'm sorry." We sat in that strange space, 2 widowers, bound by a love that came before everything else, finding each other after all the living and all the losing. "I thought about calling you so many times," he confessed. "After Sarah." "I almost did. But I didn't know what to say after so long." "I thought about calling too," I admitted. "When Robert passed." It's funny how life circles back to the same people. Have you ever wanted to reconnect with someone from your past? What stopped you? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes putting it in words is the first step. He reached across the table and took my hand. His fingers intertwined with mine as if no time had passed at all. "I don't want to waste any more time, Ellie. I'm 66 years old, and I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to find you again." The honesty in his words took my breath away. This wasn't the desperate young man I'd left behind. This was a man who knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to say it. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "And the day after that. And every day after that, for as long as we have left." Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope. Of possibility. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes to all of it." He leaned forward, his voice soft but sure. "This time, no clean breaks. This time, we see it through." As we walked out of the hotel together, his hand found the small of my back, just like it used to. The city lights twinkled around us, and for the first time in decades, the future didn't feel like something to be endured, but something to be discovered. They say you can't rewrite the past, but what if you could rewrite the future? What happened next was more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. But that's a story for next time. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the final chapter of our second chance. When Arthur walked back into my life, I thought we were getting a second chance at our old love story. But what we discovered was something entirely new, a love that had been growing in our absence, waiting for us to become the people we needed to be for each other. The first month after the wedding felt like breathing after holding my breath for 43 years. Arthur rented a small apartment in my city, and we began the delicate, beautiful process of learning each other again. Not as the young dreamers we once were, but as the people life had shaped us into. Our first official date was at a quiet Italian restaurant we'd loved in our university days. It had changed owners 3 times since then, but the same faded mural of Venice still graced the wall. We sat at a corner table, candlelight flickering between us, and I saw the boy I'd loved in the laugh lines around the older man's eyes. "You still order your spaghetti with extra basil," I noted, smiling. "And you still twirl your hair when you're nervous," he countered gently. "Some things don't change. What habits have you kept since you were young?" Some things really do stay with us forever. Let me know in the comments. But so much had changed. We spent those first weeks filling in the blanks of 4 decades. I learned about his daughters, Maya, the lawyer in Chicago, and Sophie, the artist in Portland. He learned about my David and my grandchildren who called me Nana Ellie. We shared photos on our phones like teenagers, our fingers brushing as we passed the devices back and forth. There were difficult conversations too. One rainy afternoon, sitting on my porch watching the storm roll in, we finally talked about the years immediately after our separation. "I was angry with you for a long time," he admitted, his voice quiet. "I thought you didn't believe in me enough to wait. I thought I was setting you free," I whispered. "I thought if I held on, I'd watch the light in your eyes die slowly as you gave up your dreams for your family." He took my hand. "We were both trying to protect each other," he said. And in doing so, we broke each other's hearts. The truth of his words settled between us, not as a wound, but as an understanding. We had loved each other enough to let go, even when it felt like tearing our own souls apart. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone go. Have you ever had to make that kind of sacrifice? Share your story if you feel comfortable. Your experiences might help someone else feeling that pain right now. As spring turned to summer, we fell into a rhythm. Morning walks in the park, afternoons reading together in my garden, evenings trying new recipes in my kitchen. It was quieter than our first love, less frantic, less desperate. This love felt like coming home after a long journey. Then came the day he showed me the sketches. We were having coffee on my back porch when he pulled a leather portfolio from his bag. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice hesitant. I never stopped designing the libraries. I opened the portfolio with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of architectural drawings spanning decades. The early ones were exactly what he'd sketched in our university days, soaring, impossible buildings full of dramatic angles and light. But as I turned the pages, the designs evolved. They became more grounded, more thoughtful. And on the last page was the most beautiful library I'd ever seen. It was a single-story building with wide windows looking out on a garden. And right in the center, exactly as he'd promised 45 years earlier, was a ladder on a rail. "I designed this for the community center project I'm consulting on," he said quietly. "The board approved it last week. They're breaking ground next month." Tears filled my eyes as I traced the lines of the drawing. "You never gave up," I whispered. "I told you," he said, taking my hand. "Your library was the one blueprint I never redraw." That moment felt like all the broken pieces of our past finally clicking into place. He hadn't just remembered his promise, he had built his entire career around it, creating beautiful spaces for communities while keeping his word to me in his heart. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them. If this story is touching your heart, please hit that subscribe button. It means more people get to witness this beautiful second chance. The summer brought with it the blending of our families. His daughters flew in to meet me, nervous but open-hearted. My son David, initially protective, slowly warmed to the man who made his mother smile in a way he hadn't seen since his father passed. But the true test came when Arthur asked me to join him on a trip to New York, to see the life he'd built without me, and to decide if I could be part of his future. Walking into his apartment for the first time felt like reading the last chapter of a book I'd put down decades earlier. There were photos of his life with Sarah on the mantle, his daughter's artwork framed on the walls, the ghost of a family that wasn't mine. But then he showed me his study. And there, on his drafting table, amid current projects and blueprints, was a framed photo of us from university days, young, smiling, our whole lives ahead of us. "You kept it," I breathed, touching the faded frame. "I never stopped loving you, Ellie," he said simply. "Other loves came and went, but you were always the foundation." That night, standing on his balcony overlooking the New York skyline, the same city that had taken him from me, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The pain of our separation hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. It was no longer a wound, it was a wisdom. We needed those years apart to become the people who could appreciate what we had now. As the city lights twinkled below us, he turned to me. "I don't want to spend another day apart," he said. "Move in with me. Here or back home, I don't care where. I just want to wake up next to you every morning for whatever time we have left." The simplicity of his request, after all the grand dreams of our youth, felt more romantic than any promise he'd ever made. What would you do if love knocked on your door after you thought it was gone forever? The choice I made next would define the rest of our lives together. But that's for the final chapter. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how our story ends. They say you can't go home again, but Arthur and I are proving them wrong. After 45 years, we're not just picking up where we left off, we're building something entirely new from the pieces of our past. And what we're building is more beautiful than anything we ever imagined. I said yes. That simple word, spoken on a balcony in New York, set in motion the most beautiful chapter of my life. But we didn't move into his apartment in the city, or mine in the suburbs. Instead, we found a small, neglected cottage on the edge of town, a place that belonged to neither of our pasts, but could become the home for our future. The first time we walked through it, sunlight streamed through dusty windows onto warped wooden floors. The real estate agent apologized for the condition, but Arthur squeezed my hand and whispered, "Look at the bones, Ellie. And look at that room, it's waiting for books." He was right. The small study off the living room had built-in shelves and a high ceiling, perfect for a library ladder. Have you ever walked into a place and just known it was meant for you? That feeling of coming home to somewhere you've never been? Tell me about your moment in the comments. We bought the cottage that same week. For 6 months, we became the architects of our own happiness. Arthur handled the structural work while I focused on the interior design. We'd spend our days covered in paint and sawdust, our evenings poring over fabric samples and floor plans. It was during this time I discovered the depth of the man Arthur had become. The impatient young dreamer was gone, replaced by someone who understood that good things take time. When I worried about the cost of custom bookshelves, he simply smiled and said, "Some dreams are worth the wait, even if it takes 45 years. One evening, as we sat on overturned paint cans eating takeout from paper containers, he shared something that changed how I saw our entire separation. "You know," he said, "all those years we were apart, I used to imagine conversations with you. When something good happened at work, I'd think, I can't wait to tell Ellie. When Sarah was sick, I'd imagine what comfort you might offer." I put down my fork, stunned. "I did the same thing," I whispered. "When David graduated, when Robert passed, you were always the first person I wanted to tell, even though I couldn't." We sat in the quiet understanding that we'd never truly been apart. We'd carried each other through every significant moment, even when we were living separate lives. True connection transcends time and distance. If this story has made you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps share this message of hope with others. The day the library ladder was installed, we stood together in the finished room. Sunlight streamed through the window we'd chosen together, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Arthur took my hand and led me to the ladder. "Go on," he said softly. "Test it." I climbed the few steps, the smooth wood rail firm beneath my hand, and looked out over the room we'd built together. From this height, I could see our entire story, the shelves filled with books from both our collections, the two comfortable chairs facing each other, the photographs of our combined families on the mantel. When I came back down, there were tears in his eyes. "I finally built you your library," he said. "And I finally found my way home," I answered. We didn't have a wedding. At our age, with our history, it felt unnecessary. Instead, on the 1-year anniversary of our reunion at my grandson's wedding, we hosted a housewarming party. Our children and grandchildren filled the cottage with laughter and life. Arthur's daughters helped me in the kitchen while my son showed Arthur's grandsons how to properly break in a new baseball glove. Later that evening, as our combined families gathered in the backyard around a fire pit, Arthur stood and raised his glass. To second chances, he said, his eyes finding mine across the flickering light. To love that endures. And to all the beautiful things that come not in spite of the waiting, but because of it. What would you toast to if you had this second chance? Some moments deserve to be celebrated. Share your own toast in the comments below. Now, as I write this from my spot by the library window, Arthur is across from me in his chair, sketching his next project. We don't talk about the years we lost anymore. We're too busy cherishing the time we have. Our love story isn't the one we planned when we were 20. It's better. It's deeper, richer, and more real because it contains all the living we did apart. The heartbreaks and joys, the losses and triumphs, they all became threads in the tapestry we're weaving together now. Sometimes, when I'm climbing that library ladder to reach a book on the highest shelf, I think about the young girl I once was, dreaming of this exact moment. And I want to tell her, don't worry. The waiting will be long, and there will be times you'll lose hope. But what comes after the waiting is more beautiful than anything you can imagine. The pieces did find their way back together. And the picture they make is more magnificent than either of us could have designed alone. If this story has touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for love. And if you've been with us since part 1, thank you for witnessing our journey. Your comments and support have been a beautiful part of our new beginning.